It's no secret that the housing market is on fire. Lots of first-time buyers out there trying to carve out their piece of the so-called American dream. But how do you turn that sizzling hot market into a win for you and your family? And is it really a good time to buy, sell, or stay put? Good evening. I'm BREMANTE in for Harold Fisher. Welcome to our monthly special edition of the Daily Drum on 96.3 WHUR, HUR-VOICES, and WHUT-TV. Well, June is home ownership month, and tonight's topic is winning the hot housing market game. Let's be realistic. For many, fulfilling that dream of home ownership has been difficult, but there are opportunities. That's why tonight's conversation is so important. We have assembled a panel of housing experts to give us the 411 on everything you need to know, whether you are buying for the first time, moving up, selling, investing, or simply trying to maintain home ownership. We will not be taking phone calls, but we invite you to join the conversation online using the hashtag DMV Housing. Tonight's discussion is being streamed live on WHUR.com, Facebook, and YouTube. So let's introduce our panel. Harrison Bleacher is president of the board of directors with the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors. He is also a member of the mayor's new DC Black Home Ownership Strike Force. Bill Miko is the business development manager for the DC Housing Finance Agency, and Tony Davis Spivey, assistant vice president of community and community mortgage specialist with Truist Bank. Thank you all for being with us this evening to help us make sense of what many will consider the biggest purchase of their lifetime. So Harrison, we begin with you. Is this a good time to buy a home?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And one quick correction, it's beach like the beach you swim in. Beecher is my last
Beecher.
name. And no, it's been really fascinating to answer this question for both a lot of our realtor members working to guide home buyers in the field and a lot of clients that come to me and my partners asking it. If you know where you stand financially, if you have a good understanding of income, credit scores, all those like prerequisites to be able to do this, there are still opportunities to find deals, and a deal kind of shifts, right? It is not necessarily something significantly below market, but in the beginning of May 22, there was almost 4,600 new listings that came to the market in DC, Montgomery County, and PG, and that was the 5th highest new listing amount since the beginning of the pandemic in February 2020. So there are opportunities if you know where to look. You do just have to have a tighter command of your finances, understanding that a lot of people towards the middle and lower end of this market are getting squeezed out because of limited supply in some sectors and higher financing costs with interest rates.
And Bill, let's talk about programs available out there, especially in the district for first-time buyers. What are they? How would a first-time buyer find them? Should they call you, Bill?
Oh, I don't mind when people call me, but in DC, there's really two main programs for down payment assistance. There's the HPAP program, Home Purchase Assistance Program, which you pretty much have to be a resident of DC in order to take advantage of. If you don't live in DC at the moment, you're going to go to the end of the line. And trust me, the line for HPAP stretches down Constitution and circles the Capitol. However, then there's also the DC Open Doors program, which is available for not only first-time home buyers, but it's available for repeat buyers as well. DC Open Doors, you do not have to be a first-time home buyer. You merely cannot own another home anywhere in the world when you buy your DC home. So between HPAP, which also has a sub-program, EAP, which is available for DC government employees, the Employee Home Assistance Purchase Program. Those two programs will pretty much cover your down payment on any home you're looking to buy in DC. So if you have the income and you have the credit, the only thing you would be missing is the down payment. And so between the two programs, you can take advantage. You can actually stack both programs upon each other as well. If you meet the requirements for both programs, you can use both programs together.
And what kind of income would you need? Because I could hear folks listening and watching thinking, how, what's the number? Because I know that we had a caller on maybe about a week or so ago and was talking about they were just, maybe a couple dollars away from reaching the number that would make them eligible, meaning they were just over. So is there a dollar amount that folks should be aware of that would make them eligible?
Well, for our program, I always say you want to talk to the lender because, I speak all the acronyms. I know all the acronyms and speak fluent mortgagees, but they are concerned about a borrower's debt to income, DTI ratios. And typically both programs, both programs have different ratios. HPAP will only go up to 45% debt to income, whereas Open Doors will let you go up to 50%. So to make it easy, if you make $10,000 a month, your new mortgage plus all your debts cannot be more than either $5,000, 50%, or $4,500, 45%, depending on which program you're looking at. So that may be what they're looking at when they're talking about just a little bit short. Their debt to income may not be within the parameters for that sale price on the program, on the house they're looking to buy.
And Tony, talk to us a little bit about, from the mortgage standpoint, any programs out there available now for buyers and or sellers?
There's actually quite a few programs out there, depending on your market. I'm based in Baltimore, so I do a lot more here, but I do have helped clients in Frederick, Montgomery, and PG County. For example, well, one thing I will share right now, since you raised the previous question, is HUD just recently published their new median income limits for the country. And I know in Baltimore, because I had to update my charts, the income limits increased, which was huge and fantastic news, because what that meant in my area, for example, that single person that could not access one of the down payment and closing assistance programs because their income exceeded $55,950, it's now $62,600. So I have clients that actually were in process that I've gone back to and said, hey, we can get you some money. So they were really happy about that. So that's one thing to take into consideration. If you had looked at or spoken with a lender in, say, 60 days ago, those numbers may look different for you now because the income limits have changed as far as the caps. There is money available, I call it on the federal level, Federal Home Loan Bank, Atlanta. Many of us in this region use Federal Home Loan Bank Atlanta. They do still have money left. They rolled out their program March 7th and just recently actually added a little bit to the kitty. So that means probably that's about another 60 to 90 days. And that's money that actually is forgiven over the first 5 years you live in the property. So as long as you live in a house for 5 years or more, that's funding you don't have to pay back. And you can get anywhere from $7,500 to $10,000, depending on your circumstances. Your individual lender can advise you accordingly if they are a participant in that program. So that's just one of many. And then, of course, there are local incentives that are based on the county that you buy in. And so there's funding there. And we're also at the threshold of the fiscal year. So many of those agencies that oversee those programs, if they are out of funding right now, as we are recording this show, in a few weeks, July 1, a lot of them will get new funding. So there's opportunities out there to help you bridge that gap.
Are there best counties to be looking? Are there best areas for those who are looking to buy? Because I know you mentioned it depends on which county you're looking in, sort of which jurisdiction in the DMV. Are there certain areas that you recommend first-time buyers look to get the best deal in terms of a mortgage?
Well, off the top of my head, as I would say, probably Baltimore City has probably the most amount of buckets, if you will, of programs. They have 7. Anne Arundel County has 1. Howard County has 1 program, but they have 4 tracks, different income levels. Charles County has one for their employees. Prince George's County has 1. So most of them have like maybe 1 on the local level. Okay. Now the good news is that they can, in certain cases, some of them can be combined. So you can do state money like the Housing Finance Agency, DC program, with Federal Home Loan Bank, with the local program. I know here in Maryland, Maryland jurisdiction is referred to as Maryland Mortgage Program. It's kind of like the sister to the DC Open Doors program. And I combine them all the time.
Let me go back to you, if I can, Harrison. We're talking about buying. Is this a good time to sell if you own a home?
Yeah, I mean, great question, because a lot of our seller clients that come to engage us often need to have somewhere to go. So if they are relocating out of the area, it's a little easier. But I'd say at the end of 21, the majority of the seller clients I was engaging with directly were selling and buying at the same time. So that really just takes a different level of strategy and understanding. And there are quite a few tools that we haven't used in a while that our seller clients are considering now. Something called a home of choice contingency, saying that I'm going to put my home on the market, get it under contract, but then ask that buyer to wait until I find something else. And if I can't find something else, then I don't have to move out of my home. When you've got a seller's market like we still have from a supply and demand and inventory standpoint, sellers can extract really an optimal set of concessions and timelines to make it work. So I'd argue that it's a great time to sell. The one sector of our market that is a little bit saturated and a little bit softer is condominiums in DC, Northern Virginia, and closer in neighborhoods. Those are still not really quite recovered from where they were pre-pandemic. So our seller clients own condos.
Why do you think that is, Harrison, in terms of condos?
What we saw directly was people's desire to still have a little bit more space, a second room and some outdoor space, as driven by pandemic concerns, because they thought they were going to be in their house for a while. People are still kind of feeling it, still a little shell shocked. The condos that are moving quickest for us are the ones that have outdoor space, have parking, have a second bedroom. We actually did a great piece with Axios about a month and a half ago, just talking about some of the data around our condo market. So for buyers, we want to talk about opportunity, utilizing some of these programs and considering some condo products right now. Like we've got a beautiful condo for under, like right at $300,000 in DC, in Ivy City, that you could use a program and get in the door for less than $1,000 in cash total and own it right now. Like that exists. But then if you said, hey, I would love a townhouse or a single family detached house that's got some potential to fix up, you're going to be competing with, 8 to 9 people for a product like that. So it really just depends on somebody's lifestyle and kind of what they want. But condos are presenting a good opportunity right now, just because the demand for those has not quite ticked back up.
Well, Bill, Harrison just mentioned this great deal in DC, but what if you are not a first-time buyer? I know we talked about that and all of the programs in the district for first-time buyers, but what if you're not a first-time buyer?
So
should you feel good about buying in the district?
Sure, that's DC Open Doors. There's a lot of people moving into DC because of their job position. And so if you are one of those people who have to sell your home because you're moving to DC, that's the DC Open Doors down payment program for you. We like your borrowers. We don't love the borrower. The money we provide has to be paid back, but they have 30 years to pay it back. And we provide the minimum required to get somebody into the home, either 3% or 3.5% of the sale price. So if you've owned before and you're wanting to move up, maybe you were a single person with a condo and now you are married and want a single family home, DC Open Doors will work for you because we will allow you to have been a previous homeowner. As I said, the only stipulation we make, in regards to home ownership, is that you can't own a home when you buy your DC home. So if you're selling your old home in the morning and then buying your new home in the afternoon, you can take advantage of our program. And as an aside, the money we provide can be used for down payment, but it also can be used to pay for closing costs or to pay the mortgage insurance on an upfront basis. So DC Open Doors is pretty lax as far as what you use our money for. We let it up to the lender and the borrower to figure out the best use of our money. So yeah, if they've owned the home before and they want to use it, our program to purchase a new home in DC, more power to them.
Tony, what do we, or those who are looking to buy a house, what do you need to do to put yourself in the best position to buy a home? And I know best is broad and can be subjective, but how would you determine best, putting yourself in the best position to be able to purchase a home? What should folks be doing?
Well, I guess it's doing a financial checkup. You want to make sure that, you take a look at where you are financially as far as, do I have a stable job, stable income? Do we have savings? Because, although there are incentive programs and I beat the drum and promote them day in and day out, I encourage my clients to save and to save as much as they can. because the reality is that although we may be able to get you in the home for a couple $1,000s, once that's said and done, you still got to get the U-Haul truck and, maybe feed a few people to help you move, and you're making trips to Home Depot and Lowe's, and those things happen. And so we want to, to go in that house with a little rainy day money, a little cushion money that's always safe. But, you could always consult with a lender to see about getting pre-approved and doing that pulse check and see where you are. For those of us like myself and some colleagues that have similar roles at other companies, many of us will do a consultative pre-approval in that we are giving the client and helping them develop a strategy so that they can maneuver some things with their finances, or maybe look at there may be some behaviors that are okay, but if you're going into buying a home, we might want to, as I call it, turn down the volume on some of that behavior so that to make the process a little easier for you. And once you're pre-approved, that means, and you've had a true pre-approval where the lenders really look at your income, assets, and credit, and you've had that consultative review, then you can go out and start shopping for a home knowing that you're going to be okay and the financing is going to go through.
Harrison, we have talked a little bit about the benefits to selling or buying, and we can get sort of even deeper into that. But I want to ask you about the pitfalls. And if you see it as that, what are some of the pitfalls that we should be cognizant of, whether we're buying or selling?
Well, on the buy side, BREMANTE, I think it's understanding contract terms and understanding risk. When you're writing an offer for a seller's consideration, it's really saying, how much risk am I, the buyer, willing to take on to make you, the seller, feel comfortable with selecting my offer? And the power dynamic is shifted when sellers have multiple people to choose from. They can demand the most stringent terms they want, right? So a buyer that can approach a seller with a strong pre-approval, as Tony said, with a clear understanding of their risk tolerance and capacity. And even more important right now, BREMANTE, is speed. A lot of times people will put up what we call an earnest money or good faith deposit along with their contract. And the bigger that deposit is, the more attractive you are in the eyes of the seller. But then there are contract terms that you have to write out that are protecting that deposit. If you don't have a clear understanding of your numbers, of how long things will take, or of what risk you're stepping into, there's a chance that that deposit could be lost or could at least have to be fought over for you to get it back. So in this market right now, it's really all about understanding risk on the buyer side. And I'd say on the seller side, it's really about looking close at the offers that you receive. When there's an emotional heightened state like it is right now, where a lot of people want a limited product and people are willing to say and do almost anything to get it, it's more important than ever for a seller to be working with their realtor to get context around the offers that they write. Some of our seller clients in this past year have turned down higher dollar value amount contracts for a contract with stronger, tighter terms that actually presented less risk than the money that they showed up front. So I think clarity, context, and understanding risk are the most important parts of navigating this market.
And do you actually encourage sellers to maybe sort of back off, take a little less to have better contracts?
100%. And we have actually helped our buyer clients win utilizing products sometimes, because you've heard this phrase around cash is king, and saying that there are these corporate buyers that are coming in and gobbling up inventory away from individuals trying to buy homes. And in our region, maybe a little bit further in Baltimore, just because the price point's more accessible, but DC, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Northern Virginia, you're not really competing against the corporate buyer as much as you are other places. So there is an opportunity for you as a buyer to structure your contract correctly, be in communication with that listing agent through your agent, know what that seller is looking for, and be able to get the property without maybe even paying the highest number. It's all about contract structure, risk, and being able to deliver to the seller what they want, because it is not always the highest price.
Bill, let's talk about, if you drive into the district, if you're coming in on 395 and you're looking over in Southwest and parts of Southeast, we see all of these buildings that are going up. So we see housing all throughout the district. And if you're looking to buy a house in the nation's capital, are there certain areas that you recommend folks look to get the best deal? Are there specific places in the district where your clients may come in and you say, well, let's look here, let's look there? Or is it sort of very broad in the approach that the agency takes?
Well, so first of all, I would say that question is for Harrison because, yeah, he's a realtor. That's what they're paying him for. And when I drive into DC, and I actually do drive into DC, although I come usually down Georgia Avenue and down that way. But I would say maybe start thinking for some unique, different situations for a buyer. You know, in DC Open Doors, you can actually use our down payment money to buy a 2, 3, or a 4-unit building in DC. So as long as you're going to be living in one of those units, you can be buying and renting out the other, like I said, a 2, 3, or even a 4-unit building. So we have had people buy 4-unit buildings in DC, whereas they're living in one and the other 3 people are essentially making the mortgage payment for the homeowner. So you might want to start thinking about that. DC Open Doors is a little unique. Not many down payment programs will allow a buyer to do that. If that program does not allow that, the Maryland Mortgage Program does not allow that, but in DC, you can buy a 2, 3, or 4 unit and get the down payment assistance from us. And you know, you become an instant landlord the moment you buy your home. And in some cases, you may be collecting more money than your actual mortgage payment. So as far as where in DC, you know, there's really not a lot of area in DC to begin with. You might start thinking about different unique areas, not so much areas as unique properties.
And so to be clear, your agency helps with the financing. You don't necessarily, the DC Housing Finance Agency doesn't necessarily help locate properties. You would locate the property and the agency would help you finance that property, correct?
I always say a borrower needs a lender and a realtor when they're buying in DC. They're not interchangeable, and both of those people, your lender and realtor probably think they know more about each other's job. But yeah, our role is just to simply help with the financing, only as far as the down payment goes. You know, we obviously, well, I wouldn't say as far as the down payment, but that's our key. Because Open Doors operates on the premise that if you're using a lender who participates in our program, that means that lender has been trained on our program and understands how our program operates. So they can use our program without having to do any extra steps. They simply, the borrower would just tell the lender, I want to use Open Doors. The lender would approve the borrower, give them a maximum sale price, and then at that point, they would turn it over to someone like Harrison and say, hey, I have a buyer who can afford a house priced up to here. They want this, this, and this in the house, and they want to be in this area. And Harrison then will find it, that house that meets that borrower's needs. But yeah, our role, I like talking to borrowers. I don't mind at all. But our role is really to kind of make sure buyers are working with a lender and a realtor who know what they're doing. And then take it one step further, we want to make sure that lender and that realtor know our programs and understand them as well.
Tony, should we be weary of a similar mortgage bubble crash that happened in the mid-2000s and really caused many folks to lose their homes? Is that something that should be of concern for potential homeowners?
You know, it's funny you asked that question because that has been coming up in conversation lately with the home prices going up and not so much the interest rates, but just with the prices. I think that we're not going to see or experience a crisis to the extent that we did in 2008 and 9. But I personally have a little bit of concern that we might see a little tick up in foreclosures. In talking to my housing counseling partners, I know that they have had an increase in individuals reaching out to them for assistance for foreclosure prevention, especially with going through and coming out of the pandemic. And trying to, save their homes as a result of losing income during that time period. So there's a reason to be mindful. I think that because the government stepped in and kind of created some more structure so that potential individuals would not get into these very creative loan products that put them in a questionable financial situation, we were not going to see that as much. And I think also, I think this is also a good question to, if you don't mind, I'd like to throw it to Harrison because I think he may have some input on that as well.
Absolutely. One big thing Tony and Bill can confirm, the process of getting qualified for a mortgage, BREMANTE, is very much more intense, document driven, and thorough than it was in 2006, 7, and 8. So while there are people that are paying more than they've ever paid for housing before, and interest rates are starting to tick up, specifically in the DC metro region, we've got a very qualified workforce who is extremely qualified for the debt that they have. So if there's no other metric that you consider, bad debt was a very big problem in 2007 and 2008, and it was rampant, happening at every level. But the structures in place now, while it may make a little bit more work on the financing side and the work you have to do up front, I believe that will equal a little bit more strength in this market shift or this market correction that we do anticipate happening. But crashes happens when there's a lot of irresponsible debt being given out and values getting crazy without anything to support it. The other thing that's a little bit different now is the number of people in our region. Our team works with a lot of folks relocating for some of the big tech companies to the area. So if anything, we've got a lot of reasons and support for values to be supported, if not get pushed up a little bit higher in your urban cores and your places closest to transit. So, that's the one thing I'm telling folks. Nobody's got a crystal ball. We don't know exactly what will happen, but the fundamentals of this market now and the debt that people have, they are much more qualified to have than they were in 2006, 7, and 8.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. I want to hold you just for a second, Bill, and I do want to ask each of you before we go to break to provide a resource for listeners and viewers to follow as they go through the process of home ownership or selling. So I'm going to start with you, Tony. You can just take about 30, 40 seconds, and then we'll come back on the other side and continue our conversation.
Of course, they can always visit truistbank.com. Visit our website. We have all kinds of resources, not just that for financial literacy, if they are working on getting themselves in that position. And then, of course, they can also locate a loan officer or even reach out to me in the area where they're looking to buy. Another good resource is HUD.gov. Has a list of housing counseling agencies in the market where they live. So if you like, I live in Frederick County, or I live in, Northern Virginia, I'm not sure. Well, if you go on HUD.gov and query in their search tool for housing counseling agencies, that will give you a list of HUD-approved counseling agencies in your area, and you can reach out to them, and they can tap you into what's going on in your market.
And Bill?
So I would say, aside from our website, which is dchfa.org, I would encourage anybody looking to buy in DC to attend one of our Wednesday night classes. We hold classes the first and third Wednesday of every month at 6 o'clock in the evening at our agency at 815 Florida Avenue. We're actually between two metro stops on the Green Line, and we do provide parking. So the first and third Wednesday of every month at 6 o'clock in the evening, 815 Florida Avenue, you don't have to register, you can just walk in, but what we do is we invite an open door lender. We tell the lender to bring a realtor with them. In fact, the Wednesday night, the 15th of June, Harrison is going to be the featured realtor. But we do them the first and third Wednesday of every month at 6 o'clock in the evening. You're always going to get a lender and a realtor to explain what they do, and I'll be there to explain all the different down payment programs and whatever's available in DC for home buyers. So 815 Florida Avenue, Northwest DC, 6 o'clock, first and third Wednesday of every month.
All right, and Harrison, very quickly.
gcar.com. On the main website, there's a resources tab that lists a lot of different resources from both an education standpoint and understanding financing. And there's a newly created home financing 101 guide that actually puts together a lot of the DC and Montgomery County products and tools that are available to home buyers on gcar.com, gcaar.com.
All right, we're going to take a quick station break and say goodbye to our 96.3 WHUR audience, but this conversation continues online and on Sirius XM channel 141 HUR Voices, 96.3 HD2, and on 98.3 FM. Winning the hot housing market game will continue in a few seconds. Thanks for staying with us. We continue with winning the hot housing market game. I'm BREMANTE Bryant in for Harold Fisher. A reminder, no phone calls tonight, but join the conversation online using the hashtag DMV Housing. Joining us is Harrison Beecher, President of the Board of Directors with the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors. Bill Amico, the Business Development Manager of DC Housing Finance Agency. And Tony Davis Spivey, Assistant Vice President of Community Mortgage Specialist with Truist Bank. Thank you all so much for staying with us and contributing to this important conversation tonight. I want to start with you and go back to you, Harrison. Tony was talking about, or we were talking about some of the pitfalls, and we're talking about the bubble and the crash. We know home ownership is one of the most important keys to building generational wealth. Talk to us about taking home ownership a step further and making investments into home ownership by purchasing additional property. So we're going a step further, Harrison, than just buying your home, but really investing in real estate. Who should be doing it, and do you encourage that or recommend it?
There's a statistic that I believe over 90% of the millionaires in the United States have built that wealth through the ownership of real estate, not making any dirt, right? Not making any more. So I 100% encourage it. And I believe the process to figure out if that makes sense for you is almost identical to the pre-approval process and how you amass all of your resources in buying your first home. So we actually support a lot of different clients that build their wealth through owner occupancy. What I mean is if you're utilizing a conventional financing product, right, that says you're going to live in the house when you purchase it, you can live in the house right away. And then after a year's time, and Tony confirmed the exact minimum time frame, if you have a life situation that requires you to go buy another home, upgrade, whatever it is, you can then rent out that first property as long as you understand that mortgage amount needs to be less than the market rent for that neighborhood. That's a great way to build out that monopoly board and buy your homes piece by piece. That's how my wife and I have done it. And we're up to on house number 5 right now, from building up using owner occupant loans over time. It's a hack that can allow you to do it with less cash out of pocket. Bill also mentioned multifamilies. My team represents the majority of the multifamily listing transactions in the region. Those are another way to house hack with a little bit less intrusion on your everyday life, where you buy one property that actually has 2, 3, or 4 separate units inside the property, and you can utilize very low down payment financing to do it. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach it. I 100% recommend that people do, but you do have to take a very close look at your numbers, understanding you need a little bit more cushion when you have investment property, but it's something that's more attainable than more people think and can probably happen faster than you think if you got the right plan together in terms of savings and strategy to get there.
And you call it house hack? Is that the term you use, Harrison?
House hacking. So yeah, what I mean by that is there's 2 different ways you can do it. If it's a single family home or even just a 2-bedroom. I'm a little bougie. I don't like sharing my kitchen and bathroom. So I never chose to house hack the home I was in. But that's when the easiest way is if I own a home, I rent out a room to somebody else. If it's a multifamily property and we have separate doors, separate kitchens, separate bathrooms, I can live in unit 1, rent out units 2, 3, and 4, get rental income that offsets or can sometimes help me make profit over my mortgage amount. And that's house hacking at the simplest level, but there's a lot of different ways that you can do it.
Tony, I know you kind of hit on this, but I want to go back to this to be sure our listeners kind of really can take all this in. And that's regarding how to determine what you can afford. What is the template for that to really be honest with yourself and look at what you can afford? How should folks approach that when they're looking to try to buy a house and really know what they can and can't afford and not really waste time looking at things that really aren't sort of in the possibility for them?
Right. It's a very interesting question because that template can vary a little bit depending on the type of loan that they get and their credit score and what they qualify for as far as debt ratio is concerned. I'm going to use a median number. 45% of your gross monthly income should cover your total debt. So gross monthly income, first of all, is what you make before taxes and benefits and everything comes out. So that you take your gross income, what your salary is. Let's say you're paid $80,000 a year. So we divide that by 12. And then this way I call backing into it. I take 45% of that. That tells me where your total debt is. And then we look at what is your debt. We look at your credit report and see what your car loans, student loans, credit cards, personal loans, any debt you have coming out. We don't look at utilities and car insurance, okay? And then what's left over, that's what I can use for house. And at that point, as a loan officer, I guess to say, we play with numbers all day long. So you give me a number and I can pretty much tell you what price range is going to put you at, because we play with numbers all day long. But I will say this, that's what we do. I encourage you, I guess because I did some time as a housing counselor in my 35-year career. I would encourage you, because many of the first-time homebuyer programs do require that you do home ownership counseling. And as a part of that process, you have a one-on-one session with a counselor. And during that one-on-one, they have you prepare and they review a budget. It's a good idea for you and your family to sit down and do a budget, because at the end of the day, I can tell you what you qualify for based on the guidelines, but you may have some other things going on in your life that I'm not taking into consideration, but it's still very much a regular reoccurring expense. Like you may be paying tuition for your children, or adult care for an older, member in your family. So I would encourage you to sit down and do a budget and look at what you bring home, what your responsibilities are outside of housing expense, but for all your expenses. And then what does that look like that you for a payment that is not only affordable, but sustainable, because we want you to stay in the home for as long as you would like to be there.
Bill, say you're in DC and you have lost your home. We've talked about programs to help get into a home in the district. But if you've lost your home, is there any help for you?
Well, at the moment, there's really not. I mean, there's always a network of community-based organizations, such as Housing Counseling Services, University Legal Services, Lydia's House, Latino Development. They're there to help homeowners who are in distress. But, once what in DC we called it the Home Saver Program, which was helping people who were facing foreclosure, once that ended a few years ago, there's no program that we have at the moment. So other than, like I said, the housing counseling agencies, community-based organizations in DC, whose job it is to help homeowners get through those tough times.
Harrison, some folks are looking to downsize. That might be me in a bit. I've got one in college, one step away. So we'll have a lot of house, that we can't use. So what's the state of the housing market for that? And sort of / what should the approach be for someone like me? If we've got a house that 2 kids won't be in anymore and there's a lot of space and there's a basement, should we be looking to do, what do you call it, hacking? Should we be doing that? Should we be pulling folks in to rent out the basement? So if you're looking to downsize, what would be your advice as the best approach? And I know the best, depends on your particular circumstance, but what kind of advice would you give?
No, great question. And I did just want to say, in addition to those resources Bill listed, if people are having issues in the city, DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, dhcd.dc.gov has a lot of lists of community-based organizations. If folks are starting to experience trouble, you got to get ahead of it early. Like if you're already in there, that's the hard part, but dhcd.dc.gov has a list of CBOs, community-based organizations, that can help you, navigate through challenges you're having with your housing you got. In terms of downsizing, BREMANTE, the first thing I would say is let's look at the resources that you have. Assuming you've been in your home for a while, you've got a decent equity position, maybe have some retirement. There's lots of creative ways you can utilize those funds or utilize that equity to get something else that you want. The secondary home market exploded during the pandemic, meaning people were going out to the mountains, to the beach, out of the area to find a second place to live. So if you're looking to buy a secondary home in a popular area right now, you're still going to pay a premium. My business partner has actually made some investments in the Virginia Beach 757 area. There's still some kind of interesting and accessible price points there to get a house by the beach. So the first recommendation I would say is think about where you want to go and what's the lifestyle you're seeking when you downsize. Then from there, when we figure out how much that's going to cost, we can look at the product that you have and ask the question, do you have to sell this as it is and take all the equity out, from selling it? Or are there other options? Because some people have the consideration of saying, hey, I'd like to try to keep this in the family. I want to have the house to pass on later. And some say, I've gave everything to those kids already. I'm gonna take my money and move on. Just depending on exactly which way you want to go, we can devise a strategy of tapping into that equity, either through sale or through cash out refinance, or restructuring that debt, home equity lines of credit. There's a lot of different ways you can look at it. And product-wise, BREMANTE, we've actually had quite a few of our clients, and I'm an older millennial, so I'm 35 now, had the pleasure of helping a lot of my friends, parents, and grandparents with this exact decision, looking at single-level homes, looking at condominiums. Our region actually has a decent amount of options of senior-only housing, 55 and up, age restricted, that can present some good opportunities out in Anne Arundel County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Arlington, and some in DC, not as many. It really just depends on lifestyle, where you want to go, and where those source of funds are coming from. Based on that, you really do have a lot more options. And if you can come with more cash out of pocket, that always puts you in a stronger position to be able to buy something.
Because
competition, speed, desire, right? On the sale side, if a seller is looking at and comparing two buyers side by side, they're going to put more weight behind that buyer that can demonstrate the ability to produce more cash. Now, the power of the programs that both Tony and Bill are talking about is that it can help people get the total funds in place to be able to compete and do it. But if you're up against 8, 9, 10 other offers, sellers are most intrigued and attracted to somebody that can demonstrate a lot of cash, because that gives you the ability to navigate variables. If an appraisal comes in low, if some repairs are required, if there's a challenge with the original financing plan, cash gives that buyer just more flexibility and more power and more options, but it does not always push out the folks using financing. It is just a better place to be, especially in that second home market, to have more cash, to be more attractive to sellers.
Cash and carry. I guess it never changes. Did I hear you, Tony? Did you want to?
I was just saying, yes, everything that Harrison was saying is, in earlier you asked, what can a client do to get ready to buy? And I always encourage my clients to save, even if they have, the eligibility for 2, 3, 4 programs. I mean, I've done transactions where I've stacked like 5 different down payment assistance programs, and they have money, and and the agents are saying, what they have money. Why can't I say, this is how we build wealth is that they have the ability to use somebody else's money. It's forgiven. Hold on to the cash. And also, because they had cash, when we did encounter situations, to Harrison's point, we were able to use that capital that the client had saved to negotiate through that hurdle and continue on and close.
Tony, let's talk about interest rates. It's a little bugaboo in the room. They're ticking up, right? They are ticking up, and I probably messed up. I didn't refinance when I should have, so now I'm pounding the table. What does that mean for buyers and sellers now? Because they are going up, correct?
Well, they've gone up. They have, for the most part, they have kind of stabilized. It hasn't been as active as it was between, say, February and March, April, where we saw them go up dramatically. I think the thing that has caught everybody off guard is that rates have gone up and down over time, right? But what was unprecedented with this particular situation is that we've never seen the interest rates increase so dramatically in such a short window of time. That's what is kind of got everybody going, like, oh my goodness. But to be honest with you, again, you're talking to somebody who's been in this for 35 years. And that was when I bought my first home, and the interest rate was 11.5. And I can remember times when everyone was ecstatic and elated that the rates were at 7, 6, 5%. So I think there's a little bit of what your perspective is. If you have no recall of it being in the 4s and the 5s, this seems like a lot, but it really is not a lot. It's a single-digit interest rate. It's still feasible. Is it a little bit more difficult because the home prices are more? Yes, but also at the same time, income's also a lot more too than they were in the past. So it's a little bit of, relative things being relative to where we are now. Has it made it more challenging for some? Yes. Has it squeezed some people out? Yes. Which goes back to mine, Harrison's point. Cash is king. if you have more of your own savings, you can still tap into incentive programs to help you, but that having that extra money can make the difference in if you need to put a little bit more money down to make the numbers work.
Is there any likelihood, Tony, that you'll see those interest rates go down, or as inflation continues to rise, we shouldn't count on it?
Okay, now I honestly I don't know. I
Okay.
can't even.
I'll take that answer if you don't know. That's an honest answer.
I knew the answer to that.
Everybody wants to know. That's
Yeah.
for you. I was like, I need the crystal ball as to what's going to happen and responds. Sometimes the market just really surprises you. You think it's going to increase and it decreases, or
Mhm.
and a lot of times what we see too is like right now we're anticipating the feds are going to come out and they're going to increase prime again, right?
Mhm.
So what happens is that the mortgage rates start moving and changing well before the announcement, and then when the announcement comes, it's not as bad as they think, so then the market calms down. So sometimes it's not just it's like you just gotta watch it. You try to predict or you try to get ahead of it, but at the end of the day, you're not going to know until it happens.
So, Bill, tell us this. Does DC take a different approach regarding housing and availability than other jurisdictions in our area? So, in short, is the district's approach unique?
I mean, I think so, because I don't think there's too many markets like DC. It's very impossible to buy a home in DC. It's real hard. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's very difficult. The market is a lot different than a lot of other markets insofar as DC, it does keep increasing in value. I mean, you buy a home today and you're almost assured that home is going to be worth more a year or two from now. And, the basic premise is Dr. Ben Carson once, I heard him when he was HUD secretary, mention the fact that a homeowner's net value is around $200,000, whereas a renter's net value is closer to $5,000 value. So, in DC, there's nowhere to move, there's nowhere to go. You can't expand beyond the boundaries that we have in DC, which makes the values very expensive. But getting back to the point about the rates and everything, the first step to financial wealth is home ownership. I know the rates seem high, and Tony, she speaks for both of us, and probably Harrison as well. I remember rates being in double digits talking to people. So I wouldn't be that concerned about the rate as much as I would be concerned about finding a home that fits my needs and getting into it as soon as possible.
And BREMANTE, if I may. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
They always say the best time to buy a house was a few years ago. The second best time is tomorrow, right? Because we can't really predict what will happen. When we're talking with experts like we have on the panel now, when you have that information to kind of get a better understanding of where you stand in your financial picture, your future, the cushion, the strategies you have in place to build a little bit of tolerance and risk tolerance in there, that's what's going to make more sense for you long term. And for a lot of our clients that come to us, it's about being open to areas that maybe are not as hot. Like Tony was talking about some of the opportunities in Baltimore, which are absolutely booming from an investment standpoint. We've had more of our DC investors say, man, I'm actually getting out of this and I'm going up from Baltimore and on the way up to Prince George's County, just across the line. So I think being geographically flexible and open-minded and realizing that for our region, nothing is really that far. Traffic sucks, and it might take a long time to get there, but nothing is really that far. So if you can really be geographically flexible, opportunities can be much more abundant than if you're hyper-focused on just one area.
Talk to me, Harrison, or talk to us about foreclosures. Mm-hmm. And all of our guests, you all can chime in on this. A lot of times we see that and we're like, oh, this is the way to go. But you really have to learn how that process works. So what are the ups and downs of foreclosure? Are there only certain people should be looking at foreclosures? Is it particular to certain buyers? How should we view foreclosures, Harrison?
That's a great question. When people come to us and say, I want a foreclosure or a short sale, like people come to us in a first consult and say that, I'll ask why. It's their assumption that there's then going to be some type of value add, instant equity, or larger growth opportunity that exists with that foreclosure property. And the truth is, for I'll say really 8 out of 10 home buyers, that doesn't make as much sense when you consider the total math that it's going to take. If there is a foreclosure property that is in good shape, good condition, good location, the market is going to correct that property up, and it's going to probably sell at market value or close to it anyway. If there's one that really needs a lot of work, or what we call a value add property, and you consider some of the supply chain impacts on the cost of renovation, the cost of labor, all the things it takes to fix things up, I'll sit with our clients and say, hey, I'm an investor too. I've developed multiple properties during the pandemic, and my cost basis went up almost 20% on my projects during that same time frame. So if we're doing the total math and you want to actually get into something that makes sense for your final budget, a foreclosure may not always be the right option. Who does it make sense for? If there's somebody that can do the work with their own hands, that can actually control the cost of what they have, and in a lot of situations has financing or more cash in place that allows them to be more flexible, because timelines can come out of nowhere and the bank can say, hey, I know we had this closing date, but we've got to do something with a lien release and an extra piece. There's a lot more rigidity to the process when you're looking at REO or foreclosure properties or short sales compared to a standard transaction. And I can say from our team, literally 80 to 85% of our clients end up just going the standard route. When they think about or pursue or curious about a foreclosure, comparing them side by side, the deal just does not exist in the same extent in DC, Montgomery County, and PG. Now, Tony can maybe speak to Baltimore. I know there may be more REO or other opportunities that exist up there at a much lower price where the math makes sense, but you just got too many people with too much money and too much good infrastructure for those REO properties to really make sense for your average buyer in the city proper and close in right now.
And Tony, Harrison brings up an important point, especially for many of us in the DMV. Baltimore is really just down the road. There are a lot of housing opportunities, and maybe you can speak to this, where there's some sort of dilapidated properties, or where the city has programs where, I think, can you buy properties like for $1, but you have to hold on to them for like 10 years and you have to invest in those properties. Is that something that folks should look at, or is it more, as Harrison was saying, you've got to have the cash to be able to buy some of those properties to be able to sort of build them back up and then wait for the market to adjust as what more improvements come in that community? So is that something first-time buyers really shouldn't look at? That's more of a kind of a builder thing, or contractors who have those experiences to get into those kind of properties?
I'm in agreement with Harrison on what he said about, especially with first-time home buyers looking at foreclosure properties. I could say it's ditto as far as, a lot of times they think that pursuing a foreclosure property, it means that they're going to get a deal, and half the time they're not. Their house is going to sell. If the house is in good condition, it's going to sell pretty much at market value. If it's not, it's going to sell below, but then you got to turn around and sink capital into that property, which many first-time home buyers don't have access to the amount that's needed. There also will be, I won't say challenges, but there's, a fewer products that you can use, because as a lender, the property still has to meet minimal property standards set by the agency that we're underwriting your loan to, be it HUD, VA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. So what I tell my clients, just so they can kind of pretty much basically understand, the house doesn't have to be perfect, but the only thing you should have to do with that house is broom sweep it and mop the floors and maybe a little dusting. Can't have to go in there with hammer, screws, and nails and everything else, because that means that there's issues, and those issues, they're going to want those issues addressed before you go to settlement. So then they're looking at a renovation loan, which circles back to what? Adding money to how much you're borrowing. You're not, that deal is not necessarily great of a deal. Now, some want to take on that HGTV project and put their fingerprint on the house, and that's great. That's an option. But just so they have the understanding, that may not necessarily mean that they're walking into a house with an exorbitant amount of equity right out the gate because they bought low. They're financing the renovations, which eats into that.
All right. Well, I'm sorry.
Well, no, you had mentioned dollar homes. That's something that they've been talking about bringing back. They did it years ago, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay, so we're going to wait on that. All of us. All right, we're just about out of time, but I'd like to give you all some final thoughts as we prepare to wrap up. Bill, I will start with you.
Some final thoughts. Again, the first step to building any kind of wealth is buying a home. So whatever you can do to buy a home, take that step. And if it means coming to a class in DC, Again, I keep hyping our classes the first and third Wednesday at 6 o'clock, 815 Florida Avenue. If you have the income and you have the credit, the only thing you're missing is the down payment. And in DC, we certainly will take care of that for you.
And Tony?
I would say make your a team, and you need to build out your coaches. And, you know, as I say, I'm a Ravens fan. You have many coaches, so you need to build out your team. So you need to make sure you have a good, you know, align yourself with a good housing counseling agency to help educate yourself with your lender, with your realtor, as well as the other resources that you can have to educate yourself about the process before you get too far out there and you don't know what's going on or you don't understand what's going on. Education is key and powerful.
All right. And Harrison?
Context. You really got to have context. There's so much you could read in this same media cycle. You could read 5 articles telling you different things. When you get that team together, like Tony talked about, the people on your team should help provide you context, not just for what's happening out in the world, but for what your best options are and what you need to do to be able to navigate. The sooner you can get a plan together to get into ownership of some kind, owning some dirt, owning a house, time can be the universal solvent when we're talking about building wealth. So get that team together, get with a realtor. Again, I'd love to have you with a G-Car realtor with our organization, a lender, compare all these programs and get a plan together soon. And don't just take what you're reading in the media at face value or what your Uncle Joe told you about what happened 10 years ago at face value. There's still opportunity. You just have to be creative and be willing to take prompt action on that creativity.
All righty. Well, thank you to our guests for sharing their perspectives and stories for tonight's conversation. Harrison Beecher, president of the board of directors with the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors, and also a new member of Mayor Bowser's DC Black Home Ownership Strike Force. Bill Miko, he's the business development manager of DC Housing Finance Agency, and Tony Davis Spivey, assistant vice president, community mortgage specialist with Truist Bank. Thank you again all for joining us and being with us. And finally, for many, owning a home is a dream come true. It is more than likely the biggest financial investment we make or will ever make. Our home brings security, stability, and legacy. It is something tangible that we can pass down to our family, a resource that may help pay college tuition, purchase a car, or provide a down payment on a new or second home. But for far too many, home ownership is still just a dream, fraught with obstacles and doubt. But never stop believing that your home is on the horizon. Never stop dreaming. The French philosopher Gaston Blanchard said this: if I were to ask to name the chief benefit of the house, I should say the house shelters daydreaming. The house protects the daydreamer. The house allows one to dream in peace. I'm BREMANTE Bryant. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.
This program was produced by WHUT and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. For more information on this program or any other program, please visit our website at WHUT.org.